We're in a really good mood today, everyone. All right, welcome everyone to the Leadership Radar. I'm Rachel Lee, COO and executive coach, and we have Darren Canthal, our founder. We're back here talking about something that's very important right now, which is, which is leadership, especially with new and emerging leaders, because we know that there is a substantial gap in the industry, specifically with industries in STEM, financial institutions, and we are here to solve that problem for some companies and individuals. So before we get started, I want everybody to know about our Leadership Accelerator program. It is 6 months specifically designed for new leaders. Think managers, directors, senior directors. This could even include founders that are now moving from operator and contributor to leader to grow their business. And this program is specifically designed to teach you the foundational skills as a leader, which number one, that starts with you, and then building everything around it. These are the skills and philosophies and styles and information and everything that you can think of that we have garnered from executive leaders over the course of however many years, and bringing them down to you to distill them to make them easy and implementable. It's everything that executives say they wish they would have known 10 years earlier in their career. So if it's you, if it's your company, if you know somebody, please share this episode with them, because especially this one, which is communication, which if you're like anybody else walking this earth, communication is one of the most difficult skills. And yes, it's a skill to master. So we're going to break it all down here, leave you with very tangible, actionable items that you can use in your leadership. Oh, let's use the word that you love, Darren. Journey.
Oh, the journey.
The journey. And then not next week, but 2 weeks from now, we'll be back talking about, what are we talking about next week? We'll get back to you on that one. I'll let you know. But this whole month is dedicated to breaking down the Leadership Accelerator program, giving you a sneak peek into what we're going to be doing with you as a participant in our program. So before we dive in, Darren, dad joke. To get back to you, Darren.
All right, I think this one's better. What did one hat say to the other on a coat rack? You hang here. I'm going to go on ahead.
That's pretty good.
Thanks.
Inappropriate.
Trying. I told the joke the other day at my board meeting, and this other dude, Carter, what's up if you're watching? He had 2 jokes. So next week or 2 weeks from now will be his other joke.
Ooh, and I haven't heard these. These are new to me too. So no, I like that one.
Nope, you can't know them beforehand.
I know. It's always a surprise, which usually works out in our favor. All right. Let's talk about communication. This is interesting because Darren and I just this morning, as we were getting ready for this live, we're talking about how we even have miscommunication. We're like, what do you mean by this email? You didn't give me any context. Why were you, I'm using your tone, your New York tone. Why are you assuming that I wanted you to do something? Because communication is very difficult, and there's a multitude of platforms and ways that you could deliver communication. So it's not just singular, it's multifaceted. So why don't you take it, lead us in, and then we'll start to dive into the five bogeys that we can watch for.
Yeah, I mean, this is a broad topic, isn't it? I mean, There's tone, there's cadence, there's the words we use, there's the saying that I think many of us know, which is not what I say, but how I say it. You have a great saying, which is there's what I say and what I mean. There's what you hear and what you make it mean. And I think that saying has a lot of weight, or carries a lot of weight, for what I see in today's world. Mostly when I say today's world, I'm speaking mostly through the eyes of our clients. You and I are classic examples in terms of different communication styles, right? I get excited. I raise my voice. We had an episode in our house the other day where I raised my voice. I didn't even know I raised my voice. I wasn't upset or angry. It was more in jest, and it upset our household, right? I mean, in my house growing up, that was like nothing. Wouldn't even have been on anybody's radar or any bogey. So communication is very broad. We're building upon, in our program, the Leadership Accelerator, upon first knowing who you are as a leader through values. The next step in everything is about self-awareness, knowing triggers, knowing automatic triggers, knowing default emotions. I default to anger, irritation, impatience. And when I communicate from those places, it's usually pointed, um, pursed lips. I usually curse a lot. So that's a communication style. But the last thing I'll say at this point is our good friend Ben Baker has this saying. It's not his, but he always shows it to me. And I forgot whose quote it is, but it's something like the biggest folly about communication is to think it even happened.
That's great.
Which is kind of what we were talking about before we press record here today.
One of the things that you didn't touch on, which we're going to touch on, is body language.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like as coaches, well, we'll get into that later, but body language is huge and it's very nuanced, but it will tell you a lot about how the conversation is going and how the individual is receiving the information. And I think that it is like next level leadership if you can really grab that and work with it and address it immediately. It's like ninja leadership. So let's talk about clean communication. I'm not sure that that's necessarily your word, but it's what I talk about, and you do too. I think you just use different language, but clean communication means that you're focusing on the facts, not your thoughts or your feelings or your judgments about the person's character or the person across from you. Maybe it's not even their character. I think that this is really important as a leader to be able to deliver constructive, candid, direct, useful information that is grounded in facts. And then all of your stuff that's happening is your responsibility to take care of as a leader. It's your responsibility to understand the emotions that are coming up for you. It's your responsibility to be aware of your thoughts that you have about that person. It's your responsibility to be able, mandatory, I would say, as a good leader, to deliver the information in the way and watch your body language, watch your tone, watch your cadence as you've spoken about, and your energy. Because energy is like, right? The energy is people are picking up on something and they have no idea what it is, but your energy can make or break a conversation. You call me out all the time. I will be saying nothing, just going about doing my thing. And you'll be like, hold on, what is going on? I'll be like, oh, yeah, okay, right? Because I was just in my head processing, but you felt my energy and you recognized something was off. How do you work or speak to or coach to clean communication?
All right. So very tangibly, there's a lot of I statements. A lot of leaders I've encountered when I was an employee of the corporation, and certainly plenty of clients now, will talk about you. You did this. You didn't do that. You spoke to me in this way. You always do this thing. And what happens when we speak about you is we typically put you at the defensive. And what typically happens is when you get defensive, then we're not debating about the material issue or material challenge. We're now debating about the approach, my attack on you, et cetera, et cetera. So one thing is I asked it to be done by this date. It is not. To your point, that's a fact, right? Clean communication is factual. but it's I statements. I experienced this. I felt that. And it's not, I felt this because you did this other thing, or you made me feel this thing. The I statement is about a personal experience. So that's a big piece of things. Two, from the factual standpoint, and I'm gonna be a little bit wandering here, and hopefully I'll make sense. Keep me honest. Is I was talking to a client yesterday who has a belief or assumption that her team is lazy. Exact words. Well, the exact word was lazy. They're lazy, whatever it was. Part of that assumption is they're not bought in, that they don't want to do enough work. They don't want to complete the assignment or the project or the initiative within the time frame that this leader had given. When I asked how you hold them accountable, there's a little bit of a blank stare. So one was, you set the deadline, you expected it to be done. There was an assumption that they're lazy and they're not going to do it. They didn't do it. And then what? Oh, you could just do it next week. So there really was no circling back. So in the clean communication is, there is a deadline of having this thing done by Friday. On Wednesday, whatever the date is, and dates are important. Part of clean communication is day and date, or just the date. Sometimes we say Thursday. Well, which Thursday? Sometimes we say next Thursday. Well, if today is Tuesday, next Thursday is in 2 days. Did you mean Thursday coming or the Thursday next week? So that gets confusing. And I told you I was going to wander a little bit. Time zones are important, right? We're in mountain time. And I talked to someone today who's in Germany, and I don't even know, is that UST or UCT? I don't even know what the heck that is. I had a client yesterday or 2 days ago say, can you speak at 3 o'clock? Which time zone, right? So being clear, clean, facts. Coming back to my story with my client about the lazy employees, is the deadline is Friday. On Wednesday, please provide an update. In the update, what are you experiencing? Is there any risk or issue of you not meeting this deadline? If there is a risk or issue, what are you going to do to mitigate it? So being clear as possible, I statements, using facts, using specific details.
Something you said was assumptions, and bottom line is assumptions are not facts. So right there, you are not practicing clean communication. You are practicing dirty communication. It's dirty with assumptions. Assumptions never work out in somebody's favor. Well, I shouldn't say never, rarely. So this is where I say it to my clients, and you need to be on to yourself, which requires a great deal of self-awareness, self-reflection, honesty with yourself, and the ability to pivot, shift, adapt to new models. I always say break the habit of being yourself so you can learn a new habit of a new self. So if you're a leader who operates on assumptions, you need to break that habit and learn to operate on facts, not feelings, not thoughts, not judgments. That's your responsibility. Clean communication, clean leadership.
I want to comment on that. Oh, sorry, did I cut you off?
No, I was going to say anything else on that?
I just want to mention about the breakup with yourself, because you know that landed for me. Without going through Rachel, mine or my whole history is she was my nutritionist back in 2016. And around that time, I learned that I had some dietary issues, gluten and dairy. During that time, like it had to have been at least once a quarter, I would order from Domino's or Pizza Hut, whichever one had the sale, a full pizza, whatever dessert they gave me, and breadsticks. And I would eat almost the whole damn thing. And then I would complain about my GI and I don't feel good and all the stuff that I obviously created for myself by eating stuff that I knew would affect me. And you spoke to me in a rather stern way, which works for me. Communication, know your audience, right? I do well when people curse at me and are very direct with me. And you just said, you need to break up with yourself. I was like, what do you mean? And you're like, you need to break up with the self that says it's okay to eat those foods or in that quantity or whatever it was that you said. And it totally worked. Totally worked.
break up with it, divorce it, whatever language you need that tells yourself that you are no longer participating in that relationship. Yeah. That is a sign of a good leader, though. Like when you are willing to look at yourself, and some leaders are not. And look, I am not exempt and I'm not perfect. And I've led my team within my business for years. And I have practiced all different types of leadership until I found my place. Now, could I have gotten there faster had I done program like ours, like the Accelerator? Of course, but I was so focused on driving the business. So when we talk about being a clean leader, having clean communication, operating in a certain way, it's not from judgment. It's from, look, nobody comes out of the womb like raising their hand as a little baby saying, I'm going to be a leader and I know exactly how to do it. Right? This is something that takes time and the ability to practice over and over and over, and as you say, run experiments until you figure out your own style. But if you have the good foundation, like what we're going to teach you, like it just makes it so much easier. Anything else on clean communication?
No.
Okay, let's talk about body language. So as coaches, we are taught to watch body language, right? How to become aware of more than the words that are being said. So subtle shifts in people, tone changes, like just movement, eyes directing somewhere else. Watch that shift is like an opening, I believe. And very specifically, one of my clients a couple months ago, she said, I have an employee, I was giving her feedback, and I physically saw her shift. Her words, I watched it happen. And when I said, well, did you ask what was going on for her? She said, no, I didn't. I let it go. And what happens is that's a missed opportunity to go a layer deeper of like, what's really going on? Because then her employee gave her lip service. Everything's fine. Nothing's wrong. Okay, I hear what you're saying. I'll correct it. Lip service, lip service, lip service. But really, this leader knew something was wrong. And it festered between both of them. And it did not end up well. I hate to say it could. We don't know what would have happened if she would have addressed it right in the moment. We can't predict that. But in this particular situation, it festered to the point where it was irreparable, and most likely because it had been happening over and over and over and over again. It's not a one-time event. So what about you? What do you look for with body language, or what do you address or coach to?
I'm going to answer that question and another one too about leading as a coach, asking questions. I notice, we do a lot of work here virtually. So the body language is more kind of chest up. So it's more facial expressions, a look away, a straight up or wry smile based upon a comment that was made, a look down, seemingly fidgeting with something, change of breath, any sort of movement, really. Yes, any sort of movement within, some sort of reasonability. The thing that I find interesting about what we do is we were trained to look for those things. And when we see them, not that we do it every time, but sometimes when we see them, we ask questions about it. And interestingly enough, I had a coach a couple of years ago that if I gave an answer like your example of, I'm fine, everything's fine, he would say to me, I don't believe you. And I used to hate that fucking question, but it was so effective. So coming to the leading as a coach, this is one of the, it's not fair to say like the biggest evolution in leadership that I've seen, although I think it's close to, in the sense that a lot of leaders at the most senior ranks all the way down have this belief that they need to know all of the answers. It is not okay to say, I don't know. And to some extent, it's not even okay to say I need help, but that's a little bit of an outsider. Point being, leading as a coach is asking questions, right? An employee comes to you and says, hey, boss, how do I solve this? And a lot of us love to solve problems. Here's what you should do. I have all of the experience. I've been doing it for 1,000 years. This is exactly what you do. The better leaders say, well, Rachel, how would you like to approach this problem? How would you solve it? Let's talk it through. The other part of this, which is pretty fun for us as coaches and leaders watching, this is a little more pro tip-ish, in my opinion, is in the example you gave where she watched it happen, right? Number one is to call it out. Like, I just noticed this shift. What's going on? And so that's number one, is calling out the things we see. Your tone changed, your eyes changed. I just watched this shift in you, whatever it is, like, call it out. Not like you're making fun of them, not that you're like, screaming at the top of your lungs, but you're just identifying or acknowledging you saw the shift. Now, let's be honest. Most people know that something happened with them. So and they know that the second part of it is specifically to your example, if they say there's nothing wrong, I think it's perfectly okay. And in fact, I would even encourage people to say, are you sure? And even say the words, I don't believe you. Now, I don't think you can ask that 1,000,000 times or say that 1,000,000 times, but I think you can say it at least once. And I don't know a lot of leaders that do it.
I think tying it to body language, you could take it a layer deeper of, are you okay? Yeah, everything's fine. Okay, well, I'm not really believing that because I noticed like this, and this.
Yes.
Right? So you're showing the person that you're leading, you're direct, whatever you want to call it. You, as the leader, you're showing that you are more aware than just the words that are being said. You're in tune, you're observant, you're not afraid to address physical shifts. You don't shy away from it. You're showing that everything's an opportunity. And here's where I think that mastering that can be very beneficial outside of your leadership is if you are a leader that works with clients and also leads a team, you can now teach this to your team to then recognize it within your clients. So it starts to ripple out beyond just your immediate leadership and team dynamic. You can now use this in watching, I was talking to my client about, moving their money from here to here. And I noticed like they just kind of like, stiffened up a little bit and leaned back and crossed their arms. And that is such a good way to look at your client and say, oh, hold on. I'm sensing something's not right here. What's going on? What questions do you have? What is this feeling like for you? And so this becomes greater than just your leadership abilities within your microcosm of your team. It has major impact outside with your client base, potentially your sales, and 100% within your nuclear family unit, right? Because like you said, I'm noticing something to me. I'm noticing what's going on. I can see it in you, right? It's opportunity to address what's going on and making communication, it's not taboo, but making it less uncomfortable. Because I think some people think it's uncomfortable to ask. Like, it's not my business. I don't want to pry. Oh, I can't ask that. We know very, very closely, we have an individual that teaches to people that we know, you don't ask. You don't ask questions. And body language is personal. So you definitely do not ask personal questions. Missed opportunity in my mind.
100%. Yeah, when I was saying call it out, that's what you just described it better than I. It's identifying the shift that we've seen. And you said client, some companies have customers, same thing, right? Like you could be with a meeting with a number of clients or customers and your direct reports and watching the dynamic of nonverbal communication amongst everybody.
I think it would be so fun for anybody listening is if they, this week, right, if they just started to become observers, don't do anything with it. Okay. Just start observing people's body language, facial shifts, just become a watcher, like almost stockish, and just start writing things down and see what you observe, see what you notice. And you will see that communication, I mean, the words are like a small percent of what is actually happening in communication. And you will start to become more in tune. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. So I challenge everybody who watches this to run that experiment. Just see what happens, see what comes up for you. And, then start to apply it should you choose.
We haven't said it yet. And what I think also goes really nicely with this experiment, because I do this as well, is listening. For a lot of the 8 personalities, a lot of people who are a D on the disc, we like to talk. And we like to talk first, and we want to be heard. For those people, my clients that fall into that category, almost all of them, I ask at some point to run an experiment, which is you talk last. The next time you're in a meeting, you talk last. As a tip, I say, sit on your hands. For whatever reason, it works, because I used this on myself many years ago, which is you literally sit on your hands until it's your turn to talk. It's almost like a talking stick in a way. But when you're not talking, you can observe more. And to your point, it's watching the nonverbal communication. I even like looking at or listening for people's tone of voice, right? Some people have a distinct uptick at the end of every sentence or downtick. Some people say a lot. Some people say like a lot. Like noticing those things is also attuned communication, attuned listening.
Yeah, there's a lot going, like I said, there's a lot going on in communication, and you may not master all of them. And start to practice with the different ones. Because if you only know the auditory side of communication, like the talking, if you only know that, how do you know that you're not really good at watching body language or being a listener so you can formulate curious questions or picking up on energy, right? You don't even know. You don't know what you don't know. And so you could be really, really good in one of these other communication pathways, and you just haven't practiced with it enough. So listen is another one. Like that's a whole communication. Communication, honest to God, could be 6 months alone, I think. So take all of these, practice, pick what works for you, try them all out and see what you come up with and see what happens. Then you have to speak it, or you have to learn how to communicate what you have found. Okay, so you're doing these communication pathways. You're learning how to recognize your emotional involvement and your judgments and your thoughts and being aware and what needs to shift. Now you have to send it out into the world or within your team or your organization. We call it finding your voice, which is so interesting because we all have a voice. It's more like using your voice, I guess, would be better. And in my personal experience, and you know this because we've been together a long time, is I was taught that you don't use your voice. Using your voice is scary, it's dangerous, there's going to be retaliation. It's just not what we do. It's not nice. You should be nice. So rather than speak up and communicate, we're just going to ignore, buffer, or avoid. And then I had to learn through trial and error many different ways to communicate what I needed and what I wanted and what I was thinking, and practice on different circumstances in order, and I'm not saying this very succinctly, until I figured out what worked for me. Right? Like trial and error, especially if you're really good at using your voice. You have no problem talking to anybody about anything. I'm not that way. I'm more the listener. And so I had to learn that in a leadership role, I had to figure out how to speak clearly, use my voice, communicate clearly. So I didn't say that very succinct, so I'm going to turn that one over to you. I don't feel very connected with this one, to be honest with you. What does that tell you right there? I don't want to use my voice to talk about finding my voice.
Talk about going on a pip.
I know, but Jesus. Okay. Take it.
Tangibly, for the linear thinker, communication at its core, at least at work, is how do we communicate up? How do we delegate down? And then how do we collaborate sideways? Part of that is how do we share a dissenting thought? How do we disagree? How do we debate? How do we say no? How do we say I don't like that idea? Right? How do we say those things? That's part of finding our voice, using our voice. Now, a lot of people will say, well, I don't want to hurt Rachel's feelings. Telling someone no or saying you disagree with them is a perfectly logical, reasonable thing to say when you don't agree. Now, if Rachel's feelings get hurt because I disagreed, then the first thing to look at is how did I communicate it? If I was mean, if I was curt, if I was testy, if I was pointed, if I raised my voice, then surely I influenced to a greater degree how she feels. As a sidebar, Rachel and I feel very strongly is nobody makes you feel a certain way. You choose the way you feel. Yes, I might influence it, but you feel the way you feel. With that being said, is a lot of leaders of all sizes don't do a very good job of using their voice to say, you know, boss, I don't think this is a great idea. A lot of leaders don't say, you know what, direct report, I need you to do this thing. And even though I know you got a busy plate, like I need it in 2 hours. That's using your voice. All too often what we hear is, oh, my team is too busy. Oh, I don't want them to think that I'm giving them the shit work. Oh, I want my team to know that I'll do anything that I've asked them to do, which is great in theory until you, the leader, your plate is overflowing with a whole heaping of mashed potatoes because you didn't want to share it with anybody and ask them to do stuff. And the same goes up. Every senior leader I speak to is craving constructive criticism on where they can improve. They cannot get it because lower level employees or lower level leaders think that they're going to get reprimanded. There's going to be some sort of retaliation if they say, you know what, Rachel, you're my boss and I don't like this idea. So using your voice is being able to be mindful of your emotional state. It's recognizing tone, cadence, timbre, the very words. It's having some guide or how-tos. We call them talk tracks. And talk tracks are plentiful. Everyone's got their own. I'm curious to know, blah, blah, blah. I wonder if, blah, blah, blah. Have you thought about, blah, blah, blah. Hey, I've got a different opinion. Can I share it? Blah, blah, blah. These are all talk tracks. Tactical, strategic things that anybody can use. A lot of times when I'm coaching my clients is they don't know what to say in the moment, so they decide to say nothing. So what they're using is silence, but not to its benefit, it's to their detriment. They're choosing not to speak up.
I should have just let you lead with that because everything I just said prior to what you said, we could just cut out of this whole LinkedIn live. So,
This was a big part of my own growth, right? Like I was described as enthusiastic and compassionate. And that was a nice way of saying I was an asshole. My word. No one ever called me an asshole. Well, maybe they did, but. And I call it my New York. So anyone who has a stereotypical opinion about a New Yorker, I fall into a lot of them.
yeah. And yours is that your growth and my growth are very different. My growth was actually speaking up.
Yes.
Yes. So when I was writing these notes, the ultimate ending of that finding your voice for me was if you're not using your voice, the question is why? Because this is true with everything. If you don't understand the root cause, then you are putting band-aids on symptoms. And I'm not saying that those band-aids won't stop some of the bleeding, right? There are definitely tools that you can use But the tools will only take you so far if you do not address root cause. So in my world, it's more fear of speaking up, fear of the retaliation, trying to budge in. I worked in an all male industry for years and trying just to be heard. And after a while, just giving up. That, I had to understand where that was coming from and why I was doing it, and then choose the discomfort of breaking that habit versus the discomfort of not being heard, which then, usually I had to overcompensate and fight my way through. And that's just not good either. It's just a waste of energy. So there's a reason why you do what you do. Figure it out. Get to the root.
Here's a real world scenario. This happened last week with a client of mine. And she's working on finding her voice. And it's not so much finding, it's more using. I like that terminology better. She had just gotten back from vacation. There was some sort of employee relations issue. So she walked in after the fact. She's playing a bit of catch up. She had, an inbox full of emails, initiatives that weren't being worked when she was gone, like all the things. The situation included the employment attorney of the firm. And the employment attorney of the firm gave a direction that they thought was best. Now, my client said in her gut, she did not agree and she did not think this was a good outcome. She didn't speak up because she deferred to the title. She said, well, he's the attorney. He must know best, even though she didn't agree. 2, there was a time aspect to it. It wasn't her fight. She had a million things to do. She just wanted to cross it off her list. There's this, the feel good of like literally crossing it off. She wanted to cross it off her list. And she was like, yeah, whatever. And then sure enough, when she told her boss was like, why did you do that? You know that wasn't the right decision. And for a couple of weeks, she's been beating herself up. She knew better and didn't act better. And what she kept on saying in our last meeting, not kept on, but a couple of times, she said, I need to be more aware of when this happened. How do I get more aware? And I said to her, you are aware. You knew you disagreed. So the awareness wasn't the issue. It was actually speaking up amongst all the things that were going on, all the emotions, right? Whatever may have happened with mom and dad growing up that led you not to speak up sometimes, getting to root cause, as you like to say. But there was a lot going on in that story. And that was a real one for her, not using her voice.
Yeah. And you said, don't beat yourself up. Spend whatever time you need to spend going through it, but then learn from it and move on. And I don't say that in a very callous way, but make sure that you're not stuck in whatever the feelings are of having done, quote unquote, the wrong thing. Like you said this the other day, like we have our little things that we say to each other that land, and you said, never let a good crisis go to waste. I was like, fuck yes. So now I'm always like, oh, we didn't work out with our outbound sales team that we're severing ties with. And it's like, I know it's very sensitive for you, but I'm like, all right, let's not let this go to waste. Let's figure it out. Let's move on. Let's lick our wounds and get busy moving on and learning from it. So don't get stuck. And we know someone who does this. You get stuck in the circumstance. Get out, move on, take action. So we are limited in time. I'm going to squish message versus reception and safety through clarity together because they just go hand in hand. And what I mean by this is message versus reception, exactly what we said in the beginning. What I say and what it means to me, and then what you hear and what you make it mean. There's always a chasm between the two, always. And unless you clarify what happened, like what you heard and what the other person heard and what they make it mean, right? You are having a one-way conversation. You think it's a two-way conversation, but it's a one-way conversation because you don't have clarity. And here's the thing, as the receiver, when you don't have clarity, you will be confused. you will have uncertainty. And then usually when you're left to your own device, living in uncertainty, right, you're formulating hypothesis, which almost always is worse than the actual situation. We catastrophize. It's just our human brain. And when we do that, quite frankly, if you do that as a leader and you're the receiver, your direct report, your employee, whoever it is, if that continues to happen over and over and over again, that person is going to be worn down, stressed out, and consuming valuable energy on trying to figure out what the hell you said versus actually doing their job. You have very little to no return on that communication pathway and that outcome.
Did you just put your pen down like you were dropping the mic?
Done.
There's a lot of assumption that happens when we don't bridge the chasm. We see it all the time, right? Leader gives a direction, direct report says, gotcha, goes and does the thing, and it's not on par with what the leader wanted. And then the leader gets upset, annoyed. I told you to do this thing. And then the employee says, well, I thought you said this thing. No, that's not. And we go back to root cause. The root cause was there was no agreement of full understanding on both sides.
And I would say, Darren, it's more than just an agreement. It's also like a deeper understanding of, okay, well, what are you making that mean? And how does that feel? What led you to interpret it that way? There's more questions that can be asked.
Yeah, and I'm talking about the time of, like, if I'm telling you to do, if you're my direct report and I'm saying, Rachel, go do this thing, right? The missing piece is, hey, to ensure we're on the same page, what do you understand this direction to be? Right? That's not so much about how you feel and yada, yada. Right? After the fact, sure. That's, what's that, like a postmortem? What do they call that?
Postmortem.
Yeah. But I'm talking about at the time of delivery, right? A lot of leaders do not ask, hey, to ensure we're on the same page, what do you understand this direction to be? Another pro tip, we talked about tactics at the front end. That is something to incorporate 100% when delegating.
Yeah. And this goes for verbal communication as well as email and text.
Yes.
You and I just talked about this morning. You're like, I didn't need you to respond to that email. I wasn't saying we're going to do this thing. I'm like, well, you didn't give me any direction. You just sent me this email with this link. And how am I supposed to know it? Right? Like, so this clarity, message, and the reception of the message applies to all forms of communication, however it's happening. Any parting words before I close this up?
No, you like to close it up. Why don't you give us?
Oh, would you like, what does that mean then? Is there more to, I like to close it up?
Are you kidding?
No, I'm being a smart ass.
Oh, I was like, well, how much more clear could that have been?
I'm just kidding. Okay, so we're going to close it up. Like I said, the next 3 LinkedIn Lives, we're going to continue to dive into the main foundational leadership teachings, coachings, and we like to say it's tactical and transformative because leadership is, again, it's internal. Like you can't just cross off the line on, I did this for my leadership training. So we're going to go into each of the months that we're going to be teaching inside the Accelerator program. So check back in 2 weeks, okay? 2 weeks. I don't know the date. You can help me with the date. And we're going to be diving into, please help me with that one.
I don't know.
Well, I want to, hold on. I got it. I don't know either. We'll get back to you on that one. Anyway, all that to say, listen, if you are an emerging leader, if you are a newer leader and you're a founder going into leadership and you want to join our accelerator, you must give us a call. Or if you know somebody who would benefit from this program, please share this. If you are responsible for leadership development within your team or your organization or your company, and you don't have the resources, the energy, or the desire to put your future leaders through a program like this, we can bring it in-house to you. So there's lots of different ways that we can support you individually or as an organization. And we highly encourage you to reach out to us or forward this to somebody that you think would benefit from this program. All right, everybody, we'll see you next Tuesday-ish.
Bye.
Bye.